one of the things that I was listening to you and you talked about, that there's this one item that banks want people like our clinic owners to focus on, but it's actually the least impactful factor. Can you talk about that with us?
Yeah, 100%. And that is the interest rate. Everyone gets so tied up in terms of, oh, I have, a 3% mortgage on my house, or my student loans are under 4%. And so, Jennifer, let's just go through a little quiz. All right. You walk into a bank and you tell them, I'd like to take out a loan. And they say, great, we've got two products. One's at 4%, one's at 14%. Jennifer, which one would you like?
Oh, well, immediately I'm going to say, oh, I want the 4%. 14% is going to be for suckers. That's
yeah, 100%. It's not a trick question. All right. But to get the 4%, you need to give full loan documentation, profit and loss, balance sheet, 2 years of tax returns. For 14%, can you fog a mirror? Does that change your mind?
Well, for 14%, if I didn't, I'm just having to get them data. I maybe didn't understand the question. I'm sorry.
So for 4%, you've got to give them all of this information. For 14%, basically, do you have a heartbeat? Does now the difference between the 4% and 14% change your mind? Or you're still going with the 4? Okay.
I'm still going with the 4, yeah.
All right. Here's the last two pieces of information. You're going to take the loan out for a year, and the loan is for $100. And so at the end of the year, on the 4%, you owe 104. On the 14%, you owe 114. Is the $10 really going to matter to you in terms of all of the documentation that you would have to get to save $10?
No, in that scenario, no. I probably would do the 114 on that one.
Yeah, and that's
because that seems a little to me, and I'm like, oh God, but this is hours worth of my time and effort. But we're not talking about $14 though, Howard. We're talking about, in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars, or doubling the original amount.
Agreed. And so then I walk people through 1,000, and then, but 100,000, now all of a sudden this starts to become meaningful. And so when you think about this in the bigger context, it's really not the interest rate that matters. It's the balance of the debt the interest rate is applied to that matters. And so if we have a way to be able to manipulate that debt from 100,000 to 50,000 to 10,000 to 1,000 really quickly, the interest rate becomes meaningless. And so you can keep playing the game by default and saying, I got to just find the lowest interest rate. Or you play the game by design and say, how can I manipulate the balance of the debt so that I am paying less interest quicker, sooner, more efficiently, more effectively?
I get it. And so when we were talking about my line of credit, you were like, just put if you have a line of credit in your bank and it's tied to your bank account, when you get your check or any income that comes in, you just put it towards that line of credit you're constantly using and paying back from that line of credit. So that's always going to keep that interest rate down. Okay, now I get that.
Correct. And so let's just say, if we were going to use a chiropractic office, and let's just say they had a line of credit in place and they have, $60,000 of that line of credit that they're using right now, but they collect $50,000. All right. And I know this is a little bit of a stretch, but just to bear with me, if they collected all $50,000 on the first of the month, and instead of leaving it in the checking account, they move it into the line of credit, well, they're crushing the balance of the debt down to $10,000. And now they're only paying interest on $10,000.
Yeah, but then what happens when their bills come out? So yeah, let's take that down towards the next month and the next month.
Right. So then when the expenses come due, and let's just say that it was $40,000 in expenses, you pull the $40,000 out when you need to pay all the bills off. And so the balance will slowly come back up, but it's amazing in terms of how much you can crush the amount of interest per day when you manipulate the balance. So if
Oh,
we, so this is what I try and teach people on the personal side. And I know this is an extreme numbers in terms of the 50,000 income, 40,000 expenses. But if we can just play the imaginary game, income came in on the 1st of $50,000. Expenses are on the 28th. That $50,000, again, we can put it in one of three places. We put it in checking, we keep it in checking, we move it into a savings account, or we move it into the line of credit. Because the line of credit's an open-ended tool. It's not a mortgage where it's a one-way street. It's not your student loans. You make the payment, the money's gone. You make the payment, the money is still available. It's just sitting in a different account. But now we've lowered our balance. We've lowered the amount of interest we're charged because now it's just based on $10,000 for 27 days. And in our magical scenario, all of the expenses are on the 28th. Rent, credit cards, utilities, you only pay payroll once a month, and you pull $40,000 out. Well, now the balance will come up to $50,000, but now it's only for 3 days in that month. It's 27 days at 10,000 plus 3 days at 50,000 is dramatically less interest than keeping something at $60,000.
so in the long game. So this is where you have to think of terms in the long game, which is really hard for some people to be able to do. In the long game, you're saving money and you're going to be making more money in the end.